radical when we no longer keep those in power powerful. And so I'm going to just pause and hold that moment. We no longer keep those in power powerful. So our work is not about replicating the world. We are trying to build worlds that we want to exist in. So giving thanks and honor. And I think I'm gonna go ahead and invite you all, if you kind of drop your name in the chat, maybe share your affiliation. Maybe you want to share your why. Why did you decide to join us? So giving you all some pause, and then I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to our amazing, amazing co-facilitators today, Mama Regina and Mama Joy.
Good morning, or good afternoon, actually. You can see where my headspace is. I've been rolling this morning, but very, very honored to be in this space. My name is Joy. I just want to start by sharing a little bit about who I am. I am a mom. I consider myself a community advocate and a community leader. But most importantly, I'm someone who speaks from my experience. I'm best when I can speak from experience and speak from truth. So I just wanted to acknowledge that we wouldn't even, I don't think, be able to kind of orchestrate this presentation had it not been for the experience that Village of Wisdom afforded to us to do research and to do a research project and to write a publication in a way that completely centered our perspective, centered our voice, flipped upside down some of the norms that we have maybe traditionally associated with research. And we really doing this in a time where we were kind of surrounded by chaos. This came about during the onset of COVID, when we were looking at the data and at the reflections and not seeing ourselves represented. We had a slightly different experience when it comes to how Black working families were experiencing schools closing and daycares closing and medications and testing and vaccinations and things of that nature being available to us. And so I just wanted to also set the tone with that. Everything we'll share today is from a lived experience of how we were able to reclaim and regain power in research, and how we were able to work together and use our genius and our intellect to come up with solutions that benefited not only our community, but our individual families. And if you do get a chance to read the paper, you will see the language we use is very dreamy and floral and visionary. And it is because instead of coming in to replicate something that was already done, we came in and completely created strategies that were customized and worked for us. So I hope you last but not least, kind of absorb everything that we have to say, but we're not here just to lecture. This will be very interactive. We would like to also hear from you, gather your perspective, and we also, quite frankly, want to challenge you. We hope that this isn't something that you've seen and heard all before. If things feel new or feel like they're landing in different spaces, that's also one of our goals as well. So welcome, and feel free to, as Don said, continue to interact with us in the chat or raise your hand or come off mute as we continue.
Greetings, everyone. My name is Regina Mays, and I had the pleasure to do this wonderful work, as Don said, with some other wonderful Black mamas that came from different parts of the community. We all brought our own different perspectives, but one thing that we shared in common was the trauma that we had all experienced in our own personal lives and saw throughout our community in our different areas of expertise. I am a certified recovery coach for substance use and mental health. And so, with that background, it was a wide open door of seeing not just health disparities, but educational disparities within the Black community as I work to service maybe an individual, but lead to servicing the whole family in that line of work. And so with that, I have gained the pleasure of having be named the Golden Shield throughout the Village of Wisdom organization, because I come to protect our Black community, our Black, the caregivers, those who are walking in allies as allies with us. And so it is my great pleasure to be here because, as Joyce said, this work evolved out of what was going on with our families in the Black community during COVID, but it was also in the wake of George Floyd. And so just a lot that, our Black children wanted to speak on, but they wasn't feeling like they had the adequate room and space to do so. And so by starting off with this research in the very beginning, that was the intent and the creation of how it evolved to where we are today. So I look forward to communing with you all and going through this process.
Thank you, Mama Joy, Mama Regina. So just kind of moving forward, we do want to anchor ourselves in 4 touchstones. These particular touchstones is actually coming out of the work of racial healing circles that has swept the nation, and anybody's familiar with that movement. But these are just 4 touchstones that we are asking and inviting folks to embrace during this time. And so if we have time, I would like to invite anyone to read, to select. You do not have to read them in order, but invite anyone to read one of the touchstones. And if it's too quiet, too long, we will move forward and I will read them myself.
I'll start us off. Hello, everyone. So listen deeply, listen intently to what is said, listen to the feelings beneath the words, to listen another's soul into life. Oh, I like that. Into a condition of disclosure and discovery may be almost the greatest service that any human being ever performs for another. Writer Douglas Steer. Listen to yourself also. Strive to achieve a balance between listening and reflecting, speaking, and acting.
Thank you so much. Anyone else?
Good afternoon, everyone. This is Sharon Wasco. I'm drawn to the last. So I'm going to direct your eyes down to the bottom and read, when things get difficult, turn to wonder. If you find yourself disagreeing with another, becoming judgmental, shutting down in defense, try turning to wonder. I wonder why I feel this way. I wonder what is bringing me to this place. I wonder what my reaction teaches me. Lovely.
Thank you so much. All right. Leslie, I saw you. Would you like to read?
Thank you, Dawn. I'll start with suspend judgment. Set aside your judgments. By creating a space between judgments and reactions, we can listen to the other and to ourselves more fully, and thus our perspectives, decisions, and actions are more informed.
Thank you. And can we invite someone to read the last one?
I can read it. Suspend judgment. No. Suspend judgment. Identify assumptions. Our assumptions are usually invisible to us. They inform our worldview, our decisions, and our actions. By identifying our assumptions, we can then set them aside and open our viewpoints to greater possibilities. Michelle from University of South Florida. Thank you.
Giving gratitude to everyone who dropped in this space. And again, we're asking that you hold these touchstones, that they ground you today throughout this particular session. And I'm going to go ahead and ask Joy to see, to invite anybody on this next slide.
Yeah, so again, thank you all for letting us bring you a taste of our world and how we like to convene together. We like to, ground ourselves with deep breath and music, and then we like to set, an even playing field with ground rules and how we'll interact and respect one another. And then we also like to just do some acknowledgements. If we were in physical space, we may be doing a land acknowledgement right now. But in this virtual space and talking about the topic of research, we do want to acknowledge the unfortunate harm and trauma that may have been experienced by some bodies in terms of research. And this actual exact statement you will find at the beginning on like page 2 of our publication. We really found it felt compelled to acknowledge how kind of research sits and lands on us at times. And so this is not a personal attack to anybody, but this is just kind of like acknowledging how the system and the institution of research has not always been kind, especially to Black and brown bodies. I want to invite someone to please read this statement that we have at the beginning of our research paper to acknowledge the traumatic history of research. Anyone would like to read that?
I will read it.
Thank you.
Acknowledging the trauma of research. We name the racial trauma associated with research and how using the language of research can elicit memories of harm. Whether witnessed directly or not, in the Black experience in the US, Black-bodied people in the US hold memories of experiments conducted on their bodies, treatment withheld and denied, diseases and ailments misdiagnosed and underdiagnosed, and the extraction and exploitation of cultural knowledge, all under the guise of research. We acknowledge that the research continues to advance in the intellectual canon associated with whiteness and Euro-centered knowledge dominance, which fuels the machine of the academy. We snatch research back like a bird sew in from the academy. We reclaim it and reimagine research from a community-driven and liberatory lens. We lift forward the agency of Black women and continued practice of envisioning worlds that embrace Black children in freedom and love.
And thank you so much, Fiona, for reading that for us. I just want to take a few seconds to see if one or two people would like to come off mute and just share your initial thoughts around how that landed with you. I know I had to take a deep breath while she was reading that. And then I'll invite my sister colleagues. But first, I want to invite one or two folks from the audience to just give us no right or wrong answer, but just like your initial reaction of how that landed.
Oh, hello. I'm Jacques Corey, Georgia State. And honestly, it reminds me of something one of my friends and colleagues make mention of when we talk about some of these realities of objectional research and empirical research, and made me think about post-positivism approach, something I learned even back in undergrad. So, you know, even though an emic and etic approach, and really thinking about the perspective of the researcher. And I know with qualitative research, there's sometimes sections before the methods or the results section in which one will acknowledge, you know, their own personal identity with regards to the research, because you know, some people like to lean on facts, not feelings, but the feelings are what drives how you perceive and create what we deem to be facts. And so it reminds us that, you know, things are subjective because we're human doing it at the root of it.
Absolutely. I really appreciate that. Anybody else want to chime in around how that statement landed? I'm going to invite If I'm missing somebody, y'all just speak up. I'm trying to like scan the screen, but I'm going to invite first Dawn and then Regina to share any reflections that you all may have, and then I can wrap up with some of my own.
Yeah, thank you so much, Joy. I do want to acknowledge that this was actually a potential challenge in our paper. And one of the reviewers in reviewing the paper, you could tell their bias kind of emerge, right? Like this statement didn't sit well with them. They make cultural references in terms of the language that we use. And we do want to lift up, we use snatch it back like a bad sewing. If anybody has any familiar with Black vernacular, that's like showing your natural hair. That's like showing what's underneath, what's at the root of the issue. And in this case, we're saying that we are claiming, research as a Black experience, and pulling that back into our communities. And I think Joy, Joy's going to speak to this too. We're asking, like, journal editors and folks to acknowledge, to actually make this a requirement, right? When you are asking people to publish work, to acknowledge the fact that research has done harm to communities. And we're just, again, lifting up the harm and acknowledging, again, not from a place of sticking, of staying with trauma. This is about our own, again, love and healing, but to acknowledge that this is real and this has happened and it continues to happen across communities. So thank you, Joy.
Thank you, Dawn. Yeah, Regina, go ahead.
Yes. So, again, just with me dealing with the background, as I spoke of earlier, working in mental health and substance use, I see a lot of the results of what research led to what we should do and how we care give in the mental health and substance use world. And 90% of that comes based off of research that SAMHSA, the federal government agency, puts out about how we should handle people in situations in our community. And as we know, if you look at the news, you will see it's not working for us, especially us in our Black community. Um, Not only do I work in that field, I have an intellectual development son, and I have faced multiple discrepancies because of what research said his education should look like and putting limits on him with multiple assessments, with providers asking me, why is he not on some form of medication? And now that he's a young adult, one of the first questions he gets asked is, has he ever been incarcerated or had any type of criminal charges? When the answer is no. And that's because I had to make a stance before I even got in this line of work that you will not come for my son in that manner. And even though I did all of that advocacy work, I have to acknowledge that there is still trauma that he lives from how we were treated in ER in crisis modes, or because research said that he should be transported by the sheriff department versus me when he was going into crisis mode. And now to this day, it is a hardship to even get him to take a pain pill for a headache. So when we talk about trauma and live experience, and me getting in that line of work and understand how a lot of the resources and services that were given to me and my family was based off of research. It's why I push to do what I do today. And I'm going to tell y'all, I speak up from the State House in Raleigh to the City Council to the County Commissioner's Office, because I will stand in the gap for those who cannot stand for themselves based on the trauma that they have received, because they were always being researched and surveyed, and they have lost their voice. And what this community-based research allows, when you use us in community, it allows us to find our voice again. And it allows us to be at the table, because we need to be at the table at every level. especially when you talk about how money and funding. I had a philanthropist tell me, follow the money and you get the answer. And when I started using that motto, I saw very quickly of why things happen in our Black community that they do.
Thank you so much, Regina. It was very important for me and my sister colleagues to have this statement included into our paper. Just from what Regina was just sharing, we can tell like how much we carry these things in our body. My day job, I run a nonprofit that helps mamas to improve maternal health outcomes. And so it really sticks with me, the trauma that can be instilled in us and that we carry with us from the womb. I, as a female child, am carrying trauma that my grandmother experienced when she was pregnant with my mom. That's how deeply rooted these things could be. So I have not escaped the effects and the DNA changes that came from living through some of the most trivial time periods in American history, like Jim Crow and other atrocious legalized discrimination and genocide tactics. And I think that's just very important to acknowledge. And just even when we started this project, the feelings that come up when the word research, like Regina was explaining, how extractive it is. You just extract our information. Sometimes we never even so much as get a copy of the report or a follow-up to how those things were used. Sometimes it's used against us. It's weaponized against us, right? Well, how were you able to do these things, but you said you needed help with these other things, right? And I just want to acknowledge some people are still using it as a bribery tactic. In my line of work, I had a Medicaid company come and offer to donate a couple $1,000s. And in small print at the very end of the transaction was like, oh, and by the way, we need all of the data, a copy of all the data you collect from your mamas, what their insurance provider looks like, what medical emergencies they have experienced, and how you have helped. And it was just like, wait a minute. It felt very, we want to help, we want to work with you, and much right back to the traumatic origins of, we want to kind of fishbowl study you, extract information and personal details for your life, and kind of, in a sense, marvel off of your trauma. And so Don put in the chat earlier, but I do have a call to action stemming from that for everyone, is to please consider this historic trauma and these associations. It is not an individual thing, but as you are doing research projects as a part in affiliation with institutions and academic bodies and other organizations, please consider and acknowledge the historical harm that that institution may have brought to a community, because although you didn't do it, some of those feelings still linger. They are deeply embedded. And sometimes all we need to do is just not continue to sweep things under the rug, but just tackle them head on, acknowledge, hey, we know this academic institution may not have treated this particular community the best in years, but that's why we want to work with you this time. We want to hear from you to minimize that harm. So just want to encourage folks that our associations, our positionality, our affiliations matters, and let's tackle that head on. And you will maybe be surprised about the doors of trust that you open. And to me, it improves the quality and efficacy of data you're able to collect, because now people aren't giving you the politically correct answers. You were real with them, and so it kind of encourages them to be a bit more real with you. Going to pass it over to my sister colleague, Regina, because I think another big part of trust is knowing, are you really here for me and in it with me for the long haul? Or are you popping in to extract information and popping back out in a way that I'll never hear from you again?
Right. So we're going to invite you to participate in the Jamboard at this time. Hopefully everybody can access it. Please let us know if you have any troubles with that.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mama Regina. And you all, we got a little song to guide you all. Again, we want to make this interactive. We have some music to play. This is actually one of the songs that we quote in the paper. It's Taryn Ector. So we're going to go ahead and play that and invite you to chat. I mean, Jamboard. Again, you could put a post-it, write your thoughts, and then hit save and drag it on there. We want to know what's the difference between, oh, excuse me. We want to know what are your thoughts in terms of the difference between community-driven versus community-based research. So Mama Regina is going to do some sense making of the data as you all go, but we'll do that. We'll probably do that for about 3.5 minutes, and then we'll go on to the next piece of the presentation. Thank y'all. All right, Mama Regina, I think that's you.
All right. I was in the jam. So I'm seeing a few things that's popped off that caught my attention, and I'm a highlight. And please feel free to come off of mute if you can't do so. I will be watching the chat. That shared money that's down at the bottom in between both lines with the attendee that put that in, like to come off of mute, or if you're able.
Hey, hi.
Yes, you want to say a little bit more to that?
Oh, you know, and I teach CB PAR stuff, so I talk about how, well, CB PAR can be on that spectrum of everything led, driven by, owned by the community, and then, to the further end of traditional towards traditional research, you just come in with a survey and say bye. You know, there are ways in which money can be shared. You can put on community members who aren't affiliated with the university to be research assistants. Now you have to train them on different aspects. You can have people be paid to be part of the recruitment team. And also, one thing I did like when I at Straw, I believe it was you know, part of the grants that they wrote, they included to bring community members and young people to the academic conferences to present their own research. And so I feel for both of those terms, they do include, can include aspects of having the money be shared, be it going directly to the community or written through the university to hire community members for these projects.
Okay, thank you for sharing that. And I will say I attended a conference in California where it was a lot of PhD students presenting their papers and different things of that nature. And one of the things that came up quite a bit from the university rim is how the universities try to govern the spending of the money. And so sometimes the researchers were putting out ideas of how to utilize the funding, but they were getting kickback from the universities. Can anybody kind of attest to that by like a show of hands? And so I don't know if you know if there can be a conversation about even how the community can aid you all as researchers when you are faced with challenges like that, because sometimes what I'm finding is not the messenger that's telling you know what it is, but it's the one that's guiding the message. And so community gets upset with the wrong person or the wrong entity. As we even go through this process this afternoon, I want you guys to also consider how we as the community can aid you all. If it's going to be shared space and shared work, what does that really look like and sound like in your world? And like I said, I'm one that go everywhere from the state house to, to all the county commissioners and different things at that level. I also see temporary um, impacts. Somebody want to speak to that? Who put that in there? If you're able. If not, it's okay. Or if you can put in a chat, that's awesome also.
I didn't write that, but I agree with it. I think from my perspective, it speaks to just maybe like a lot because the research isn't driven by the community, by their perception of their needs or their strengths. It may have less buy-in, and therefore it's maybe not being absorbed or uptaken because it's not really owned by the community. So the result is going to be more temporary and more a fitting solution or a fitting outcome from a researcher perspective and not from a community perspective.
Totally agree. We're all nodding heads.
Oh,
Are
sorry.
you able to give an example of that? And somebody else was trying to speak. I'm sorry.
Oh, this is Britt. I actually wrote that note, and for me, I think the outcomes of community-based research are temporary. They're very short-sighted, and so that results in short-sighted or temporary impacts in general, as opposed to when it is community driven. It's actually focused on like the longevity of the impact and thinking long term about the relationships that are created, just how the research will shape the community, like as far as like generations to come, as opposed to like what do we want immediately, which is like kind of a result of community-based research.
So would you kind of say, do you think it's because a lot of times research is more about reactive instead of preventive?
Absolutely.
Gotcha.
And then also, not only is it like reactive, sometimes people are, well, I should say more of institutions, they go into communities with this thing that they already have in mind. And that contributes to that.
I think Joy and I can both say we have been a living result of of some of that. Yeah, definitely.
Can I hop in? Because
Go
you
ahead. Go
you
ahead.
said it right. I'm itching to just share a couple of reflections. I don't know if y'all saw me, like I was the one like moving things around on the Jamboard, because I just see a couple of themes jumping out on the community based research side. It is these words are not there, but I see like this feeling of tokenism. Like we have, space fillers here so that we can check off this box. We do see the word power there. So like there's not a lot of power sharing. And I want to uplift that. It seems like I can't stand this phrase, like that low hanging fruit phenomenon. It seems that sometimes we just, try to put out the easiest, research questions so that we can plug folks in, check the box in, and receive the money, right? Publish the paper, publish the report. And then conversely, on the community-driven research side, I just saw a lot of themes around inclusion, around the decision-making and power sharing. So what the community members want is being prioritized and uplifted, besides them given a narrative or given a set of directives to fulfill. And I really wanted to uplift the comment around it requires time, relationship building, and accountability, because I think a lot of what happens is people, get these grants or research awards that are like, figure out this problem in the next to 12 months. That's not how things work. Especially, I saw a lot in the chat around some of you working around maternal health and things like that. Heck, you're pregnant for 9 months. You need to leave them alone for the next 3 so they can get level-headed. That's your year right there. How are you really building relationship, figuring out what the problem is, figuring out what needs to be asked and what needs to be resolved? So I just wanted to lift up the time and energy commitment that it actually takes and requires to be community driven versus taking a more extractive approach of just plopping in and I'm just here so I won't get fined checking off these boxes. But I really appreciated you guys' contributions to this.
Yeah, and I also want to say, even kind of to the point you just made, Joy, in the chat, Melissa had the same with some nonprofits. So I used to work for a nonprofit, and one of the main reasons I left was for that very made point. Sometimes, as Joy was saying about how they even came to her organization about Medicaid, they use who is rooted in the community to do the dirty work, right? And so I can definitely understand that nonprofit spectrum, but when what is not understood about when that happens is when the nonprofit have to say we're no longer working in this avenue, just like I'm sorry, I think it was Sharon. Hold on, let me try to get back to it. Um, it was put, yes, Sharon put in a project about like when projects are only for 5 years, right? And community is sitting there like our issues are still here, and or we're working it and we're growing in this, and then it just stops. And a lot of times that can kill people morale. So when the next person comes along, they don't understand why community has a bad taste or don't want to be involved. I saw, is it
Myra.
Maria or Myra?
Myra.
Yes.
Myra.
Yes,
Yeah,
ma'am.
so I just wanted to share. So I'm originally from Colombia, and after living in this country for 19 years, what I have witnessed is like, oh, the same model that the United States and the developed world uses to third world country is the same model that you use in the US for people of color, which is even when you say, regardless, there, I will argue, I work in community activation, not organization, not mobilization, is activation, which really requires that you come in with an asset mindset, recognizing that these communities, despite all the challenges, have solved their issues in a different way. And even like I joke in Jacksonville all the time, say, oh, we talk to the community leaders. Who are we talking about? The same three pastors that people don't know. So even like the definition of community is so relevant, because regardless, I have worked in the nonprofit for a long time, but I'm a trained researcher. So I want to give you kudos. I've never seen the trauma acknowledgement in research, and I was driving, so I couldn't react to that. But it's really like, who are we talking about? Which voices? I would love for us to stop saying that we're giving voice. We're not giving voice to anyone. We are amplifying their voices. So we are just activating their voices. But I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done, both from academia and also the nonprofit sector. Let's stop pretending. In many cases, let's just say it. It's performative work. We're not trying to solve the issues. We're just trying to show enough to pretend that we really care. So that's my soapbox.
Thank you. I love it. I love it. Hand claps all around.
Can I say
so-
something, Regina?
yes, ma'am.
I just want to say you all, the knowledge, the nuggets of wisdom that's being dropped in here is, again, we need to have more space where we're learning from each other. I also want to hold that the nuggets of wisdom that you see on the PowerPoint is driven by mostly Regina and Joy. So again, we do have nuggets of wisdom that we are trying to drop, but it really is being informed by Regina and Joy's lived experience, not just being, as they say, mamas, but living research in my community in a different way, where I'm about transforming the systems that continue to replicate these inequities across, these communities and neighborhoods that I experience and see. So I just want to say, we dropping nuggets in here, and this is Regina and Joy's nuggets that we drop in. So I also want to know the alignment of folks' definitions that you all alluded to in that Jam board, and hopefully you see how some of your own definitions resonates with these definitions.
Most definitely. And I don't know, I will invite my colleague to come offline. Off mute. When our paper was being reviewed, and one of the reviewers kind of kicked back, Dawn immediately not just emailed, shared the email with Joy and I, but she shared it with all of us, all 5 mamas, right? And though we are different, powerful women in our community in our own way, because trust and believe, we're all doing the work in different ways. We have a community health worker involved. We have one staff from Village of Wisdom. Like, we are all tapping into our purpose and our Black power and uplifting this work. But for Dawn to even share that work with us, like, it took or that reviewers' comments, it took us to another level. And it also educated us, just as someone said earlier, like, the tools have to be put before us, but it doesn't mean it give us some foundation, but then let us create the way that we want to do the work. And I think that's, for me, that was the overall takeaway of even having the opportunity to do this. I was one of the ones in the paper. I can verbalize things, but I'm of a creative mind. And so my creativity comes out in art and dance and expression. And if you tap into what that is for me, that is my words. And this paper left room for me to express it in that. Now, again, I do documents all day long to SAMHSA. So I can't use that space to, I can implement some arts into it now, depending on what I'm submitting. But for me to be able to have a full space where I can be my full self and get the same message out, and then we have the results of what it can equate to in our community. It didn't minimize none of us that participated in this. And again, when Dawn shared, it gave us a different insight and it gave us a different intake, because let's remember, not everybody's going to agree with you, and they don't have to. We don't have to agree with them, and they don't have to agree with us. But can we find some even playing field that does not hurt? At the end of the day, the overall message is don't hurt our community. That's it. Come in and get your data and different things like that, but show up different so it does not hurt our community, and leave us to be our full self, authentic self, but also leave us to grow and learning the knowledge, the terminology, and different things so we can translate it universally. And I don't know if Joy want to speak to some of that.
Thank you, Regina, for lifting that up. Yeah, I will just say the things that are landing for me. When you set out to do things differently, it is going to feel different. You will probably, get pushback. That's when people have to really, put their money where their mouth is, as people say, and actions are going to be lead. And you may find yourself disappointed because you thought everyone was on the same page as you, and you realize that folks really aren't willing to do the work. The one word I would have added to the Jamboard would have been culture and cultural considerations, as you see listed here on our list. It is and can be harmful when we take a blanket cookie cutter recipe and try to lay it on top of each community, because each community is not the same. I know we may joke about, East Side and West End battles, but there's a difference. Living on the West End and living on the East Side, you may not have grocery stores in one community. You may not have access to things in your language on the other side of town and things of that nature. So taking into consideration how people speak, how people eat, how people interact with each other, what time of day is the best, what trauma may have been experienced in one community. If a bad storm came through and knocked out the power and flooded all the streets in one community, you may not need to be, knocking them for attendance at a meeting the next morning. If gun violence rippled through the community that you're surveying, you may need to take a break and tend to their mental and emotional health before continuing to survey them on additional things, right? And so I think that is a major component. Get to know the culture and the values and what matters most to the community that you are serving. And I want to acknowledge that as you start to really work deeply in community, you're going to hear things that don't sit right with you, because it's like, wait, but we've always done this thing in this way, and you guys are telling me you don't want it in this way, or you don't want this particular, version of health. And as leaders, as researchers, as folks with the large sphere of influence, you have to sit with that. We surveyed some of our mamas. We were going to offer free therapy. We knew it was the best intervention in the world because everybody needs therapy. And we got grave pushback. They felt like we were calling them crazy, trying to take their kids. How dare you say that I need mental help? Not everyone was as receptive to this grand solution that we had come up with that we thought was the resolution for everybody. And we had to take that on the chin, and we had to listen, and we had to make sure we weren't forcing therapy down people's throats. We had to make sure people were ready for it. We had to make sure that people wanted it, that we were providing therapists that looked and spoke like them. People were like, I'll only take a therapist if she believes in the Islam faith and things of that nature. And we had to respect that, because you don't want to be, have that saviorism complex to the point where you are tone deaf to what your community actually needs. And so another call to action for me would be, make sure you are listening, and make sure that you are acknowledging that regardless of how many years of school, how many books you may have read, you may not have all the answers. The thing that you feel is the answer may actually be the thing that would cause harm to that particular community. You invited everybody to the table to eat, great, but you didn't ask what their allergies were. And now you have an entire spread where this person is gluten-free and they can't eat anything on the table because it's cross-contaminated, right? And so I just wanted to lift that up, that it takes so much time and energy to be intentional about this work. It actually goes neatly into my next question for you all. As you begin to work with community, you will likely, like Regina was saying at the beginning, there's so much that community can teach researchers and academics and things of that nature. So I want to open up and ask the question. Feel free to drop in the chat or come off of mute. But what have your experiences been like when you go deep into the trenches to work with community members that are on the ground? How have you welcomed community members into your work? How, is anyone wanting to uplift some examples around how you've incorporated shared decision-making and things of that nature? Or lessons learned? Or any of that, because saying it is one thing, right? And I think some of us may carry the experience, but moving into implementation, moving into doing it can be a whole different ballgame.
Joy, yeah, I actually want to reflect on, if it's okay, just to kind of set it off. So you all, yes, have a PhD trained in community psychology. And I want to talk about my own push. And my push was with a paper. And I'm gonna get emotional because, I was like, okay, I got this. I have an outline. I started populating the outline for the paper, and we had our first meeting. And y'all remember them. And it was the 5 Black mamas, and they started going in. Joy was like, hold on, dreams assessment. No, this came from the emergence. It came from over time. We started out with a needs assessment. And then Nadia was like, and then, no, we need to use some of our language and all of these things. So I just want to share that for me, it was so empowering in my own freedom practice to get out of the trained mindset of how I thought about how to write a paper. And yes, we had to push back on a reviewer's bias and racism and their inability to even embrace some of the language in there that they felt was, again, acknowledging the Black vernacular. But how we pushed on that. And then again, we got the information saying the paper is going to be published. So I had to even lean into my own freedom practice that I can even do that, right? So again, I just want to acknowledge my own learning as a community psychologist and my own practice of listening, my own humility, and my own willing to embrace that I don't know it all. And I have a lot to learn.
Thank you, Dawn. And to piggyback a little bit off it, when I tell you all, when you see this publication, we have references to music in there. There is artwork in there. There are cut off slang words in there. There are, phrases that you may not know if you didn't grow up in a certain, demographic or subsection of the country. And one of our reviewers basically said, this is not how you write a publication. If I don't understand this slang word, so it's not valid. I don't even know what you all are saying here. Why would you make such a specific reference? Why are you all, acknowledging these things that are outside of the actual paper? Do you mean measurements here? Do you mean, is this your conclusion? I don't understand what section of the paper this is, because we weren't, we didn't have a clear, this is methodology. This is, whatever. And the one of our mamas even said, I'm glad that Dawn is speaking for us, because the energy it would have taken, the blow that it was to hear, you can't use the words that are comfortable to you because smart people won't understand, what y'all are saying. And one of our mamas was like, I would have just said, okay, hit delete and moved on about my day, because y'all can't understand what I'm saying and I don't have the energy to translate, in front of a majority white academic audience. But Dawn carried that burden for us, and instead of, dumbing down our language or making us change our voice, she inserted footnotes. She took extra time and energy to explain what some of our references meant, why the art was most relevant, why the song was the best way to express the phenomenon. And we got published. And sometimes that's what it takes as an ally, is to put yourself in the middle and do the work and help push things along. And show folks that it is possible, and use your own sphere of influence with your colleagues to say, no, we're not going to change their words. We're going to respect those words. When we sit in other spaces, we have to learn the acronyms. We have to learn the abbreviations. We have to learn how things are measured. For one publication, it would be okay if maybe other folks had to meet us halfway this time. And so I just appreciate Dawn for standing in that gap. I see Tom waving. If you want to take yourself off mute. You're on mute, Tom.
I think this is such a wonderful example of what happens when we meet the system working with people from the community. And the confrontation around publication, all those things, and the battles you fought are so terrific examples, because we present it as if, oh yeah, just do it and it'll be okay, because we've preached this forever. But when we actually do it, then you've got to have the courage, and as my people would say, the chutzpah that Dawn has to confront and deal with the system when it comes at you. So it's wonderful to talk about those examples, because I think that's what the field has to face if we're going to do this work authentically. So I appreciate what you're saying enormously. Thank you.
We thank you, Tom, and we thank all of y'all for allowing us into this space. I'm gonna pass it over to my sister colleague Regina. We had some suggestions of some do's and don'ts for people to consider as you try to go deeper into intentionally engaging with community.
Right. So I'm gonna kind of follow the protocol here and just invite some to come off of mute and read any bullet point that sticks out to you.
Oh, this is Jacques Corey. The last one, it takes time. You cannot do this in 12 months. Relationships move at the speed of trust.
Thank you. Yes, that is huge. That I've always experienced within the community, that trust. Yeah. Anyone else?
I'll go. I'd love be willing to redistribute funding into the hands of the community. I love it. I think willingness is the first step, and then advocacy, co-conspiracy, all the duplicity in the name of making sure that the community is resourced in some way, because we know there's no way to really compensate for all that we are eliciting and all that we are growing from and learning from. So I just love that is on here very plain.
So can I tap into you for a little bit longer?
Yeah,
Can you
let's do
just
it.
can you just state so it has been my experience that it is handed out in maybe $25 gift cards to local grocery stores or Visa gift cards and different things of that nature. So what would be your definition or your vision of what compensation in the community looks like?
Conspiracy has looked like making up gigs, like making up jobs, research roles, and negotiating in real life what that actually looks like. You know what I mean? But for the purposes of a grant proposal or, you know, conveying the work to a funding partner or whatnot, we just do what we got to do. We use our language, we use our codes to make sure that we're just doing the best that we can. I mean, I get just completely inspired by some of our 30+ year mentors, some of whom have created entire separate research operations or firms so that we're not dealing with the indirect cost of our institutions, really robbing us of being able to fund and finance our work and our folk. So, you know, that is like dream space for me as a researcher, to be able to have capacity and know-how to do that. But for now, I'd be making up gigs and roles.
Okay. I can appreciate that. I get,
and the work is there, right? It may not be
right.
data entry, nothing like that, but the work is being done. So I love the Peter Pan principle.
Can I add something to that? Recently in Jacksonville, we were doing a porch-to-porch survey around the social determinants of health, which of course, I'm like, so much money. We already know what the problems were. But this was like by a local organization. But even though I was hesitant, you know, I'm of the researchers. The way we did it, we trained people who live in the neighborhood to go and talk to their neighbors. And they were compensated $20 an hour. The people who participated got a compensation. They got compensated to come to the focus group. But this is something that I didn't expect, and it was so beautiful. My colleague, she's the principal researcher, she said, what if we invite some of the people who are surveyors to present the results? Mm-hmm. That's compensation, is recognition, is you're the expert in your life. I am not. You know, I can be proximate, like as a Latina woman who grew up in poverty, I'm proximate, but I cannot take your place. And I'm just so excited. We also told them, hey, if you're applying for jobs, we can be a reference for you. And these are all Black people who live in an area of town that they will never, I'm like, the way they even convince people to answer the surveys. I have to share this with you. There was one of the guys who collected the most surveys, and you know, the compensation, it was like less than 10 questions. So he said, hey, I'm going to give you $5 cash. And the person said, no. He said, well, with $5, you can buy a beer and 2 blunts. And we laughed so hard because you know, as a Latina, I'm like, what a blunt? So my friend had to explain it to me. But this goes beyond. It's just like also having the chance, like my friend paid for the lunch when they finished, the sense of accomplishment. I am like, this goes beyond. So I also think like compensation, of course, I don't work in anything that people are not compensated, and you're not my co-investigator. You are not, no, you are part of the process, and your voice is different than mine, but you should be compensated in many ways, getting the credit. So I love that you stood, I don't know your names, I'm sorry, like to say, this is why this is relevant, even though it's in the research, whatever protocol, this not, if we're serious about this, then, you know, elevating those voices and recognizing people for the value that they bring is another way for me of compensating. It's just seeing
I don't agree with
them.
you.
Go ahead.
Just
sorry.
Yes, I'm mute.
I wanted to add on something to what Myra said. There's a report that was published about trauma-informed community building, and there was a line in there that said, oftentimes community members are the only people in the room that aren't getting paid. And that really resonated with me. And like when I talk to some of my like colleagues in urban planning, it's like, oh, like a light bulb goes off in their head. Like, oh yeah, we are paying these consultants all this money, and we're getting this expertise from the community members.
Can you please elaborate?
I'm sorry?
Yeah, I'm having a hard time understanding like what you're saying. Can you elaborate? Okay.
So what I was saying is there's a report about trauma-informed community building, and in the report it said that oftentimes community members are the only people in the room who aren't being compensated. And this is a reference to, like, I'm an urban planner, so oftentimes consultants are paid to do to conduct research and analysis, and they'll reach out to community members to provide their feedback in the form of community engagement. And their lived experience is valuable expertise, but they aren't treated that way. So they're not compensated for providing that valuable expertise.
Thank you for definitely sharing that, Brett. That definitely resonates with me because I said that when I know somebody's getting paid to do this project, a couple of $100s or even thousands. But also to piggyback on that, when it's us in community, that is I'm gonna say the vital part, right? Because if you have no feedback, then you have nothing to present. And so to belittle the community in that nature and not give some form of compensation or upliftment. I see your hand, Dr. Michelle. I'll get you 1 second. To not uplift that, especially I see when you say urban planning, I'm learning that in development, everybody is starting to hire individuals known as the community engagement personnel because of just shift the way that development is going. And so that is one of the biggest parts. I'm going to have to kind of put that up there with the health industry now because nobody wants to follow what infrastructure did to the Black communities in the past. And they're claiming that they want to do something different. And so just because you speak to us, I'm finding out it's rooms that we don't even get invited into. They invite us into the rooms that they want us in. So thank you for it. I can go into that forever. But Dr. Michelle.
Thank you so much. I have a question. It's more, so in my research, for example, I was interviewing undocumented mothers and asylum seekers, and one time I had to, I had to stop to avoid creating traumas, right? And sometimes, for example, now I wanted to share, and the mother, for example, she shared with me like, I think better like I want to have a break, like so I respected and I stopped asking questions. And now, for example, I really wish to share with her the final of my research, but since she asked for like she was going through so much, so I want to respect her space. So now, how is one thing is also we recognize the time to share the findings of your study, but at the same time, the family is like, how do you behave in that situations?
You kind of broke up a little bit. Can you say that last part?
I think I heard you say, I think I heard you were saying how basically the research project may have triggered one of your participants and they asked for a break and now you want to share out the results. It's like, how do you respect the space that they asked for, but also make sure that you don't just kind of ghost them and not include them in some of the results and recognition, right?
Yeah, no, I included, but I want to share with her, for example, the results and say the power of your voice, of your experience. But sometimes I want to respect her space. So I think that situation just made me think about being aware that we as a researcher, the time of us, even though we want to be ethical and everything, but at the same time we need to learn about when stop following up, for example, but sometimes how we do in the situation to share the research with the families, even though they ask for, like you know that situation, that lab situation, they are going through so much that you don't want to cause harm and you don't want to be bothering. So it's just I'm trying to figure this out.
And I would say first, I want to give you hats off and applause for even acknowledging that, because that doesn't always get acknowledged. So as a community member, that gets researched a lot. First, let me acknowledge that you at least are willing to respect her space. Secondly, I would say that I don't think it's any cookie cutter answer. You might have to tap into how interactions, what did you learn from the interaction about how she navigates as a person? Even is she the type of person, based on your previous interactions, that you're respecting her space, but you reach out in a text, or you reach out by giving her a mail, something sent in the mail. So you're not hounding her, but you're still, like Joy was saying, acknowledge her participation and letting her know that, because you never know why somebody backs off, right? It could be another things. Life happens for everybody. Or you never know would have been her reaction to how the project was going and research was going. So if it's a soft way of just letting her know, the acknowledgement, like I said, maybe through the mail or a text message or email or something of that nature, to let her know that this is what your value was and how it equated and landed. Joy, you got anything?
Yeah, a couple of things. One, if you're able to share space, if you share space with Dawn in other capacities, I may would lift up this question in those spaces, because I think that she has a lot of experience just working with us. Things went down. Our babies got sick. We had gun violence in our communities. We,
I'm
had
sorry
just
for interrupting, but somebody called Brit Red and just like private
Excuse
messages
me.
I
me.
don't
Yeah,
know.
excuse me.
They
Excuse
just,
me.
I think it was your mom in this chat.
Amanda,
Okay. Yeah.
whoever is talking. I don't know why. I think we have some trolls on this
Yeah,
call.
because I saw someone like in the chat say like really bad things under somebody else's name. So I think they joined back. I'm not sure though.
Okay, we'll try to mute everybody. Yeah, I think we just had some trolls in there today. But thanks for acknowledging it. I think Don has. The other thing I will say is this reminds me yeah, we have some trolls in the chat, which happens when you talk about Black mamas in Black spaces. It's so amazing to me because people don't attack things that aren't powerful and intimidating to them. So it also gives me a little affirmation that we're doing very important work, important enough for you to take time out of your day to interrupt us. So, but it reminds me also to go back to the beginning and see how, if there's another iteration of this done, see how parent leaders and participants can help to craft the questions. I have denied surveys being sent to some of my mamas because I'm like, these questions are completely triggering. We're not going to ask this in this way. So
Isabel Mustard just DM me something about my feet.
Maybe some sort
I
of
just want to report that to you.
Maybe some sort of consideration around how, how those questions can be rolled out differently in another way. And then piggybacking off of what Regina says, hopefully in a community-driven project, you have someone that kind of holds those relationships and holds that trust. So maybe checking in with that community leader saying, hey, have you heard from such and such? No need to ring the alarm. I just want to make sure everything's okay. And then lastly, I say make sure you transfer relationship building and value into your work. How do you value your colleagues? How do you build relationship with your personal friends and family? Sometimes it's just as simple as, how are you doing? Don't mention the work, don't mention the research, don't mention the paper, but how are you doing? What do you need? Just checking in, tapping into connecting your humanity with their humanity. Because like Regina said, you never know what people are going through, but I think it's important, especially if you are doing longer term projects and things like that, create space just for relationship building outside of the work, so that there's some sort of avenue to connect with people outside of the work moving forward, because things do happen. And I thank you again for even considering it and thinking about it and wanting to add that compassion in, and even asking the question.
Sorry to interrupt, but I just wanted to, because I think I got muted last time. Isabel Mustard was private messaging me saying about my feet, how she wants to lick them. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention.
So we're going to go ahead and move forward. Again, we acknowledge that
I
whenever
don't
we
understand why my
are
complaint
working,
isn't being taken through.
I'm gonna ask you to be quiet.
Huh?
Yeah, we're gonna go ahead and move
I
forward.
just want to like report something like that's really rude in the Zoom meeting. I don't think they should be tolerated in the meeting.
Thank you. Thank you for your report. Yes, so I just want to
You're very welcome.
acknowledge. Yeah, thank you so much. So if we can just want to take the last sort of few minutes of your time, and I know we lost a couple of folks. We do hope that we can get folks' email in the session. So we've been more than willing to, I believe this is being recorded, so we can kind of make sure you guys have access to the recording, our slides. I do want to name some other folks in the space.
How do I gain access? How do I gain access to the recording?
Yes, we'll send you, just drop your email into the chat and we'll get that to you. So I want to name the other Black mamas that are not in the space who were on the paper. They were co-authors. So Courtney McLaughlin, we say her name. Janice Page, we say her name. Nadia Porter, we say her name. We want to acknowledge other staff at Village of Wisdom who helped to influence and even shape the opportunity for us to do this dreams assessment during COVID. And that's Mama Ayesha Abu, Dr. Amber Majors Ladipo, we say their names, Taylor Mary Weber Fields, we say their name, and Robbie Atu Berry, who's currently a researcher at the University of Maryland, College Park. And just acknowledging all the other Black mamas who could not join us in the space. Just want to, again, acknowledge them and the work that they continue to be doing in terms of truth tellers. So right the last week, I dropped a survey into the chat. We do ask you all to share maybe a word or two. If you have something that you want to share that's on your heart, we invite you to take these few minutes. We have a few minutes to take some questions. And just as much as we entered with music, we have a little song to transition folks out. So
yeah, so I have a question. Can you kind of like elaborate on like everything you said? Cause like, or like not like do like the exactly like 2-hour presentation, but like it's like a 1-minute summary, you know?
I'll give a 1-minute summary. That will be to listen to folks that don't typically aren't heard. Listening means stepping back, being quiet, suspending what you think you may know, and allowing other expressions and ideas to come into play. Making sure that we aren't make sure that we are paying attention to intent versus impact. Our intention may be to be helpful, but our impact may be harmful, and you won't know the difference until you invite non-typical voices into the space and truly listen and let them lead, which means just giving them space, resources, and autonomy and true support from behind to execute some of the ideas that they have. So it's suspending what you may have learned to be the norm and listening first and figuring out how you can stand behind those folks quietly and help them to execute these innovative ideas.
My quick summary will be coming to work as a partnership and not the tailship, and consider your why through the whole process. Always revisit your why.
And when your why starts to misalign with what's going on, it is okay to acknowledge that and step back and leave that space for folks who do have the time and energy to execute the why in an intentional way. It's okay. Sometimes we want to do and resolve everything and you can't. So it's okay to say, you know, I may not be the most appropriate vehicle to move this forward at this time. Let me step back and allow this space and resource to be given to
that's very inspiring. Thank you.
More position to work with community.
All right, I think maybe Tom, I do want to hold the floor, and I know we were supposed to give it to you. I think it's Michaela, so acknowledging, please take yourself off mute and share. But I do want to pass it back to you, Tom. Just if there's